Lesson 156. Obey, disobey. Do naughty children at primary school always obey instructions that their teachers give them?
No. Naughty children at primary school don't always obey instructions that their teachers give them. They sometimes disobey them.
Stick, stuck, stuck. Pin, drawing pin. Opposition. What do we have to stick on an envelope before we can post it?
We have to stick a stamp on an envelope before we can post it.
What do tailors use to fasten pieces of cloth together while they're sewing?
Tailors use pins to fasten pieces of cloth together while they're sewing.
How do we stick notices on a notice board?
We stick notices on a notice board by using a drawing pin.
What are the three forms of stick?
The three forms of stick are stick, stuck, stuck.
What do we mean when we say that somebody sticks to a plan?
When we say that somebody sticks to a plan, we mean that they refuse to change their plan even when the situation is difficult or there is opposition to their ideas.
Border. Are the police allowed to follow a criminal across the borders of their own country into another country?
No, the police aren't allowed to follow a criminal across the borders of their own country into another country.
Which countries does your country share a border with?
My country doesn't share a border with any country.
What do we generally find along the borders of a field?
We generally find a hedge or a fence along the borders of a field.
Pattern. Do you prefer plain clothes or clothes with a pattern on them?
I prefer plain clothes.
Who do you think should be more responsible for setting the correct pattern of behaviour for children, parents or teachers?
I think parents should be more responsible for setting the correct pattern of behaviour for children.
Financial. Do some people get into financial difficulties through spending too much on their credit cards?
Yes, some people get into financial difficulties through spending too much on their credit cards.
Weave, wove, woven. What am I doing?
You're weaving the first finger of your right hand over and under the fingers of your left hand.
What are the three forms of weave?
The three forms of weave are weave, wove, woven.
What kind of things can we make by weaving?
We can make cloth, baskets, etc. by weaving.
Ruin. Tourism. Are there any parts of your country that have been ruined by tourism?
Yes, there are some parts of my country that have been ruined by tourism.
Are there any old ruins in your hometown?
Yes, there are some old ruins in my hometown.
What are they?
They're the ruins of an old Roman wall.
Whisper. What am I doing?
You're whispering.
Why do people whisper?
People whisper because they don't want others to hear what they're saying.
Lamp. How do you prefer to see a living room lit? With overhead lights or with lamps?
I prefer to see a living room lit with overhead lights.
Garage. Do most people in this area keep their cars in garages or leave them in the street?
Most people in this area leave their cars in the street.
Stiff. Muscle. If you suddenly do a lot of physical exercise after a long period of not having done any exercise at all, do your muscles feel stiff the next day?
Yes. If I suddenly do a lot of physical exercise after a long period of not having done any exercise at all, my muscles feel stiff the next day.
Cardboard. What is a cereal box usually made of?
A cereal box is usually made of cardboard.
Astonish. Would you be astonished if one of your family members walked into the room right now?
Yes, I'd be astonished if one of my family members walked into the room right now.
Refusal. What's the noun of the verb to refuse?
The noun of the verb to refuse is refusal.
Give me an example, please.
Her refusal to listen to other people's opinions means that she will never be a good manager.
Bound. Out of bounds. Boundary. Is England bounded on all sides by the sea?
No, England isn't bounded on all sides by the sea. It shares borders with Scotland and Wales.
What does a sign on a door saying out of bounds mean?
A sign on a door saying out of bounds means that nobody is allowed to enter the area beyond the door.
How does one generally mark the boundary of one's property?
One generally marks the boundary of one's property with a wall, fence, hedge, etc.
B. Wasp. Sting, stung, stung. Sensation. Slap. What's a wasp likely to do if it lands on you while you're sunbathing and you disturb it?
If a wasp lands on you while you're sunbathing and you disturb it, it's likely to sting you.
Which do you think it's more painful to be stung by, a bee or a wasp?
I think it's more painful to be stung by a bee.
From what else do we get a stinging sensation?
We get a stinging sensation when we are slapped by someone, when we clean a wound, etc.
Curl. What do we call a piece of hair that forms the shape of a ring?
We call a piece of hair that forms the shape of a ring a curl.
Does smoke curl upwards when there's a strong wind?
No, smoke doesn't curl upwards when there's a strong wind. It gets blown away.
Why do cats and dogs often curl up when they sleep?
Cats and dogs often curl up when they sleep because it prevents the heat from their bodies from escaping.
Paste. Toothpaste. What's a paste?
A paste is a mixture made from a powder and a liquid.
When you go to stay at someone else's house, do you take your own toothpaste with you, or do you ask to use their toothpaste?
When I go to stay at someone else's house, I take my own toothpaste with me.
Creative. Novel. Does one have to have a creative imagination to write a novel?
Yes, one has to have a creative imagination to write a novel.
Store. Variety. Tinned food. What's a store?
A store is a shop which sells a variety of different goods. It can either be a very large shop in the city, which sells food, clothes, furniture, and almost anything you can think of, or it can be a shop in a village that sells many different products that the people in the village might need.
Should wine be stored in a warm or cool environment?
Wine should be stored in a cool environment.
Do you keep a store of tinned food at home?
Yes, I keep a store of tinned food at home.